Welcome to the Global Tech Leaders Podcast, where we help business leaders and individual contributors with actionable insights to hit their number and figure out the nuances of truly operating a business globally today, squeezing the essence of the lessons learned from the planet's top tech leaders. This is your guide to joining the fast track to global market scaling.
Welcome, I'm Ross Lauder, your host from Single Focus Talent, and I'm joined by our non-exec director, John Quigley, today.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
So today we are joined by international rugby player Bernard Jackman. Bernard has had a very prestigious and career around professional rugby and has now transitioned into the business world. I was keen to catch up with Bernard in relation to how business psychology can lean on sports psychology and what that whole ethos looks like from a psychology perspective. So welcome to today's show, Bernard.
Thank you very much. Glad to be on.
In terms of your own career and what has brought you to where you are so far, thus far to date, as it were, maybe could you just walk us through where you've come from and the decisions you've made at each point in your career and where that's led you, if you would?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been I suppose a varied background. My dad is a cattle dealer from a place called Tullow, County Carlow. So my early stages would have been, at marts or calling the farmers with him. Trying to sell cattle. So sales was always an area that I was passionate about. And when I left school, I took on a course in DCU, International Marketing and Japanese. And marketing for me was the nearest I could get to sales. There was no degrees in sales. So I effectively felt, well, that's going to give me, I suppose, a formal education in as close as I possibly can get to sales. The Japanese was just an add-on. I wanted to have a skill set that was more unique than German or French or Spanish. So I was enjoying that. I did that for 2 years. I was just about to go to Japan for my third year to do a year Erasmus, 6 months in college, 6 months in work over there when rugby went professional. And Warren Gatland offered me a contract. He was the coach of Connacht. So I deliberated over it and decided it was too good an opportunity to turn down. So I transferred into a course in business studies at DCU and took the contract in Connacht and managed to play professionally for 14 years. But in that 14-year period, I had a year where I failed a medical, so I didn't have a contract for a year. So I went working for a company called AstraZeneca as a pharmaceutical rep while I rehabbed from an operation. And I also, while I was contracted to Connacht, I opened up 2 retail shops in Kildare, 2 Gala franchises, and managed to build them from being, I suppose, fresh field sites into being able to flip them just before the crash in 2005. And I finished my career in Leinster. I did 6 seasons in Leinster, which is my home province, obviously, and was lucky enough to be part of a bit of success in Leinster 2009, winning our first Heineken Cup and part of the Grand Slam for Ireland 2009 under Declan Kidney as well. So I was always fascinated by coaching, and my goal was to coach professionally and also potentially coach professionally abroad. I missed out. I played 2 years in Sale Sharks as well in Manchester, but I had a few opportunities to go play in France as a player, which I turned down because I was in a very good environment in Leinster. But I definitely had one eye on trying to get to France to coach professionally because I had a young family. I had a 5-year-old daughter Ava and a 3-year-old son Ben who I felt, for us as a family, it would have been a great experience to get them to somewhere like France while they were young and pick up a language a little bit easier than maybe it was going to be for me. So I got the opportunity to go to Grennoble, or a small club in the French Alps, East France, Southeast France, and I went there as a defence coach. My first year, we were in 2nd division in France, and thankfully we got promoted, and I got to spend 5 years there. As a coach, ended up 2 years as head coach, and then we wanted the kids to get back to Ireland, and we wanted them to be Irish, to get an Irish education, and so we came back to Ireland in 2017. But I got an offer to go to Wales to coach in the Dragons. Warren Gatland again would have been instrumental in that, and I went there, did a year and a half. I commuted back to Dublin from Newport, and I got sacked from there end of 2018. Came back to Ireland, had a look around corporate world, and was keen to get into sales and prove myself in that, and give myself, I suppose, another option rather than just be pigeonholed as a professional coach. Where the reality is, there's only 5 jobs in Ireland really that would be suitable to me as a head coach. So, which means I would have to probably travel, quite a bit, and that wouldn't be ideal for the family. So, had a little look around Dublin, met a few people, and got an opportunity to work with a company called Refinitiv as their senior account manager for Ireland, and just a year now on the 1st of July, and I've really loved it. It's been great to try and take the habits and learnings from pro sport into a sales career.
Well, I mean, I'm very keen to dive into that. It seems to me there's a lot in that to begin with, and it seems that you take on a lot. I mean, you mentioned taking on franchises, you mentioned taking on different sporting challenges, and now you've moved into the corporate world. Could you maybe just tell us, how do you define your mindset, and when you're making decisions, like what do the criteria look like for you?
My mindset's adaptability. I want to be, for me, success is proving that I'm adaptable, that I have an open mind, and that I can transfer my skills into other areas. So I'm also quite active in media. So I'm involved with the 42. I'm involved with RT. I work for Premier Sport, Air Sport, and the BBC. So again, that's another area that I enjoy the challenge of trying to go in and perform well, and I suppose keep my spot there, because it's a very competitive industry. There's a lot of pundits around, a lot of ex-pros who are looking to get into that. So the big thing for me is adaptability, getting an opportunity and then delivering, and that's what drives me. Is a little bit of, I suppose, internal satisfaction you get when you've either you've brought success or mastered something that you didn't have a strong background in. And
one of the other salient kind of aspects I picked up on there from your overview was very much around culture. So I'm keen to explore, you obviously did Japanese in college, which I can't imagine a more difficult subject to try and take on. And then you decided, I'll also move to France as well. Now, obviously the UKI kind of culture is somewhat a little more similar. Obviously there are nuances and such, but it's a little bit easier to gain an affinity. Like, take me through what it's like when you're landed in a new culture, and what that kind of shock is like, and then maybe how you translated that to a business challenge, if you would.
Yeah, so again, I think, like, for me, obviously I'm in the financial services industry now, selling pretty complex financial products, mainly around data, and it was a real stretch for me, because I didn't have a background in that area, either having worked on the other side in the financial services, or haven't worked in the sales end of it. So it was very similar to me in terms of going into a new dressing room. So when I went into Leinster, it was obviously full of really high profile players, and I hadn't come through the Leinster Academy as such. As I said, I've been in Connacht, I've been in Sale Sharks, and there's that feeling of a little bit of imposter syndrome. And what I tend to do is I tend to just keep my head down for a little while and observe the behaviors and particularly the leaders in the group, and see how they do things, see what's accepted or what's the norm, and then drive myself to deliver that and get credibility through my ability to deliver, and that's what happened when I went to France. I didn't have the language in France, so I did German in school, unfortunately, and so suddenly I was given this opportunity to coach an area of the game, defense, with 16 different nationalities. Obviously the majority were French, but we had Fijians, Samoans, Tongans, Georgians, Romanians, Kiwis, South Africans, and it's very difficult to deliver a message across so many different, I suppose, different backgrounds in a way that is impactful. So, and particularly when the majority, they want you to deliver it in French. So, I suppose for me it was about creating slides and imagery and examples and clips that got my message across while I was picking up the language, and then It was something probably I picked up from Joe Schmidt. Joe Schmidt went to Claremont without any French, and Joe Schmidt's obviously got an unbelievable rugby brain and would have so much information that he could pass on to players. But because of his lack of French, he tried to narrow it down to the three most important points for every day, and learn how to say that in French and then deliver it and try and be as consistent as possible around those messages. So, I copied that, to be honest. And, so I worked out for every meeting I had or every pitch session, what were the three most important points I wanted to get out of that. And, worked with my translator and my French teacher to learn how to say that in French. And then obviously just stuck to it. And the way it's gone now, that was probably, that was 2011, but I'm actively involved now in trying to learn around how we take on information in terms of, how we should deliver messaging. And, it's kind of gone back to that again where, there should be 3 or 4 big rocks. And that's what you got to focus on. It's the 80-20 rule. And I think that's, I didn't know it at the time, but that is best practice really. And, even when I managed to become bilingual, probably in the second year, I stuck to that principle and didn't try and, I suppose, overload players with information, and just made sure that we kind of knew what we wanted to do, and that was consistent on a week-to-week basis.
So Bernard, like all of those are just hallmarks of someone with like an extremely high level of accountability. And unfortunately, you can't have a company full of Bernard Jackmans that have that level of drive. And I'm kind of saying this with the context that a lot of the time in organizations, I find that we assume that we can turn salespeople loose and they'll automatically engage buyers with, thoughtful conversation that include empathy and business acumen. And, that's not something that you learn overnight. So, I mean, from your perspective, putting your leadership hat on now, your coach's hat, how do you enable sellers to have thoughtful, knowledge-based interactions with their buyers?
Oh, look, I think it comes down to the prep you do beforehand. And, this would be massive. I mean, we would, as coaches, as a coaching group, we would meet at 6 o'clock, 5 mornings a week. And the first players might be in the environment till 8:30, and our first meeting or presentation mightn't be till 9:30. And as a head coach, it's my responsibility to make sure, I'm across, all the key messages that are going to be delivered throughout the day. And the only way to do that is to prep for it and discuss it. And I suppose use the intellectual property in the coaching group to make sure that we are, giving our players the best possible information in the most concise, clear way. And you do that from your, as I said, from your preparation. And if it takes you 2 or 3 hours to be ready for that presentation, well, that's what it takes. If it takes you longer, it takes longer than that, because the coaches would come in the morning at 6 o'clock, with the first draft of what they wanted to review or preview. And I think it's really important that as assistant coaches and as a head coach myself, I mean, I would get feedback from them around what I want to deliver as well. And I think that's really powerful when you have that, I suppose, alignment across the whole organization. And then we would have dropped down a level further into the leadership group, or game management group, which are 2 different things. And we would have involved them then as well. And sometimes we would have got them to deliver. We would have helped them put together the presentations, but we would have got them to deliver. And I think that's really powerful when players from within a team or individuals from in a team are actually helping deliver the strategy and are involved in what it is. So, for salespeople, for me, going to try and meet a client, it's about your prep. It's about understanding, what you're selling or what you're trying to achieve out of that meeting, and then doing as much background information on the client you're about to speak to, and that's where obviously you tap into your CRM or whatever, or your notes from past meetings or from speaking to colleagues, and just making sure you're prepared. I think if you're prepared well, there's a far better chance of delivering. It's like, it's very similar to getting the team ready or a horse ready to run. The better your preparation is, the more likely it's going to be a positive outcome.
Yeah, I love that analogy, with the sporting context around people, making the presentation, to ensure that everybody's aligned. I've always had the philosophy that we have at Arseways in sales coaching and enablement, and it's like, what if the first thing that you ever did when someone joins your organization as a salesperson is to train them on the market and not on the pitch?
Yeah.
Not on the sales pitch or what we do, or, to actually help them to understand the market that they're operating in, the people that are in that market from a buying perspective, and then test people or make them do presentations, as you said, to, make that a thing in your sales motion, to help them make that presentation on just the market. I think that's hugely powerful, So I suppose my question is, then it's, how do you teach or train people and to have the ability to coach that? Like, who coaches the coach?
Yeah, I think we need to focus on, rather than actually having a generic training manual or training style, or 6 stages to complete the program. I think we could be a lot more time efficient if we spend, the first part of it actually understanding what level that salesperson or that athlete is at, or where they're struggling, or
Very good,
where they're
very
strong. And like, for example, when I arrived at the Dragons, I tried to implement a policy where for every meeting the players would bring a journal with them, and that they would take notes. Okay, and it's not rocket science, but there was one player who I felt was a cultural architect in the group, a guy called Gavin Henson, who's quite high profile towards the end of his career, but had played for the Lions, had played for Wales, had played for Saracens, Toulon, and we had a very young group. So he was somebody that the young players looked up to. And I noticed that for the first couple of meetings, he didn't bring his notebook, and I'd asked a few times, I said, it's really important to me that people have a notebook with them, just so they're ready for the meeting and they take notes. And I was getting very frustrated, and I thought he was actually trying to rebel against the way we were trying to do things. So, I brought him in for a chat, and I just said, look, Gav, have you an issue with how we're trying to develop the group here? And I noticed that you're not bringing your notepad. And he said, look, to be honest, I've tried this over the course of my career, and I'm a real perfectionist. So when I'm taking notes, I want the notes to look perfect. And I effectively find that I'm spending so much time, I'm absorbed in the neatness and the beauty of my notes, that I actually miss the next 2 or 3 points. So in my experience, I'm far better off just sitting there, listening, engaging. And then when I go down to the dressing room, I do a little voice recording on my phone. And then when I go home that night, I fill in my notebook. And again, it was just my lack of understanding. In actual fact, he was at a far higher level than everybody else, because he really knew how he needed to operate. And again, I asked him then to explain that to the group, because I'm sure there was other people in the group who, just by having a notebook, didn't mean they were engaged. Like, for me, the point I was trying to get was how important it is we take on information at every meeting. It's absolutely unimportant to me now how people take it on, whether they have their iPhones and they take notes on that, or whether they take screenshots. The most important thing is that they're actually learning. And that, there's an example for me, that if I had a team of salespeople, I'd rather spend time at the start understanding their background, understanding where they're passionate, understanding where they see their strengths and where their weaknesses are, and try and make their training, I suppose, specific to that, rather than go through a bog standard manual or a sales approach. That's how I operate at the moment, because I think I've very different strengths and weaknesses than someone who's been in sales 20 years. So for me, it's really important that I'm focused on making my strengths better, but also looking to add educate myself and make myself better in my weaknesses, but not waste my time doing a generic 6-hour course.
I think that's very apt and makes complete sense. And it's interesting you mentioned Gavin Henson there. My kind of standout memory of him was being on the Lions tour in New Zealand in 2005, and we all had camper vans for hire at that stage, traveling from Auckland down to Wellington on the North Island. And the camper van beside us had decided to get electrical tape. And on the side of the camper van, which is all in white with black electrical tape, they had written Gavin Henson's mobile makeup unit. I just thought that was just quite creative, quite frankly, you know.
Yeah, no, he's a gas man. He wouldn't do ice baths because we put chlorine in them, and effectively took away his fake tan. So he actually, and in fairness, like, he's the most professional player I think I've ever coached, but he'd send us a video every night of him back in his house doing his ice baths with just water, you know, and ice. So yeah, he's a look, he felt if he played well when he looked good and he felt good. So, you know, he spent a lot of time grooming, and yeah, it worked for him for a long time.
Well, I mean, that for me brings up some interesting questions around spotting talent and discerning between folks who might be good versus prima donnas. And you talked about developing people there, and there's no playbook that's definitive for anyone or everyone, should I say. And I think that's absolutely clear and correct. And I'm a big fan of the Ken Blanchard leadership style, where they talk about the 4 different stages, D1 to D4, as in don't know. So it's unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and then kind of autopilot, as it were, and kind of adapting your style. But I suppose my question around that is, you know, how do you spot that raw talent, that person who just has that spark, but maybe just doesn't have the kind of structure, the skill, like the kind of procedural piece? How do you determine that? Like, what do you do when you look in someone's eyes and you assess them as a personal on that level there, Bernard?
Listen, I think there's no shortcut to it. I think it takes a huge amount of background work to, well, for example, for our game, we'll be looking through tape in leagues that maybe aren't high profile, looking for players who maybe showed ability at underage level and for whatever reason fell out of the pathway. And this is because I suppose my last 2 jobs I've been working with teams with very low budgets, so you have to try and find the rough diamonds and potentially the guys who are talented but don't fit into the character side of it that a lot of teams want. I mean, Barcelona, for example, you know, they have a saying that talent will get you into our dressing room, but your attitude will decide how long you stay there. You know, and they can afford to do that. They can afford to maybe release a player who's very talented but isn't committed to the culture. Whereas, I suppose, for the teams in the bottom end of the league in terms of budget, sometimes you have to take a risk and back yourself to be able to get that player to conform if they've had, you know, discipline issues in the past. But the only way of doing it is, I think, is through, you know, actively searching for talent. And as I said, in our game, it's probably watching footage, it's going to games, it's speaking to coaches, it's, you know, dealing with a lot of agents and trying to find out. And then when you do find the talent in terms of what your eyes tell you, then you have to do a lot of background work in terms of, you know, what's his family support like, what's his behavior like, and, you know, talk to players he's played with, talk to coaches, talk to physios, and try and get as much background information as you can before you go meet them. You know, I never signed a player without meeting them face to face at least once, and if at all possible, geographically, you know, 3 times if I'm in the same country as them. And I think that's really important. I think it's really important for the head of the organization to, you know, really spell out how you see, how you want the organization to look and what the culture is currently, and if that's in a state of involvement, you know, where you're trying to get to, and then, you know, get feedback from them as if that's something that they'd be interested in, you know, because the worst thing you can do is not have those conversations early. I think pre-signing, to be honest, pre-hire, the more information you know about each other, the better, and it just eliminates any mistakes.
So in terms of information there, I think that for me is an interesting and vital topic today. And I've been on record as saying, in God we trust, but all others bring data. Maybe, Bernard, if you could share with us what data has meant for the modern game in terms of sports and what decisions that brings, and then how that translates maybe into a business environment and brings accountability to the table.
Yeah, look, I think as coaches, we rely on our gut feel, I'd say, far less than we rely on the data, and I think we have to. I mean, you have to use data to drive performance. I think, and that starts on a Monday morning when the players come in and they do their medical screening, and you're getting information around how actually they recovered from the game on Saturday, what their hydration levels are like, what their mood is like, how well they've slept, and then that'll actually dictate to a certain extent what your Monday looks like, and that continues throughout the week, and it's all about trying to use whatever reliable data you have to help you steer your strategy. And obviously, if your long-term strategy, and then you have your medium-term strategy and your short-term strategy, which is generally around what can we get out of today? How can we organize our day in terms of our time on feet, off feet, on the pitch, in the gym, to make sure that we give the players the best possible chance of improving. And I think that's it's a gift we have as professional coaches, the improvement in I suppose in science, sports science at the moment. And I know it's evolving all the time, and every 6 months, it's getting better either through the I suppose services we're currently using being upgraded or new technology coming on board, that we are able to be much more specific, scientific around how we organize our training sessions and help players be in optimal condition on a Saturday. And it's massive, and it's not just the rugby side of it. I mean, obviously we go into real detail around what our performance was last weekend, what it's been like year to date, in all different aspects, and each coach will have probably 3 KPIs that will give them a good indication of how they're tracking in terms of their area of responsibility. But then it's the other little things I mentioned, like the sleep quality, the hydration levels, the speed at which they can lift a certain weight, in the gym, how many meters they ran, how many accelerations, decelerations, which can give us really good feedback in terms of, did we hit the numbers we expected to hit in a certain training session, and can we consistently hit those numbers by reviewing it and making sure that we get better at being consistent in terms of hitting our numbers. So yeah, there's a lot of different data we can take on board, and again, the key question or key answer is that we have to make sure it's accurate, and that's really important. But once it's accurate, then how much knowledge do I have as a head coach around each area? I would say I need to be an expert on the rugby stats and data. I need to have a general knowledge of all the sports science parts, but I need to trust my sports scientists to be able to be real experts in those areas, and then to be able to give me really good feedback and advice, and then I factor that in with the rest of the whole, I suppose, staff to try and change or continue with the strategy we have.
Cool. So Bernard, you seem like the kind of person from speaking to you and what you've told us that's extremely highly adaptable, and you do well with change. Perhaps you even crave or like change. So I'm thinking you're not having too much problems with what's going on in the world today. But what's your view for sport? What's your outlook? What's your view for sport and business in terms of this? I'm not going to say the new normal, because it's the new abnormal, if the truth be known. But what's your view or outlook for sport and business with this new abnormal?
It's obviously very, very difficult, very uncertain, but the teams and the businesses that I suppose embrace it, find solutions, and then obviously build processes to exploit those are the ones that are going to be successful. And I think that the companies that have been successful for the last 20, 30 years, you'd like to imagine that they have been successful because they've been built on strong principles and foundations, and really good leadership and good management and good processes, and they will be ahead of the curve, or they're already have exploited spotted areas that exploit or continue to be successful in, and the same with the sporting teams. I think and for sure some will drop off and some won't thrive in this environment. But I think that's what you want in your life. You want opportunities where you stand up and be counted and make a real difference. And sometimes when things are going really well, it's very hard to actually quantify your impact on the success. And smooth seas never made a skilled sailor. So I do think that there will be certain people who will be really embracing this difficult moment, as hard as it is, and in 2 or 3 years' time, we'll go. Look at, I showed my resilience there, and I showed my ability to problem solve, and I showed my ability to bring people together, and to create success despite a difficult climate. And that's you don't always get that, and that's I think that's fascinating, and it's a challenge that we need to meet.
Yeah, I think it's calling people out to really focus on the buyers and customers. I think for a long time, a lot of organizations forgot about their customers and buyers in terms of that focus. And my view is that people who are really good at account management and relationship building and all of those skills required to build a relationship, they're going to do really well.
Yeah, hopefully. And I mean, again, it's true being, having empathy, having really kind of good conversations with your clients, and finding out where their stresses are, and where they're going to go, and obviously then trying to make sure that you fit in into that, and you help them through this. And I think the companies that can help their clients, I suppose, survive and thrive in this, that relationship is going to be so strong in the future, because people remember. You remember people who delivered for you when you're under pressure, and I think that's that I didn't mention that as part of the opportunity, but that is the opportunity, and not just in terms of pure sales, but in terms of just being someone that is reliable and consistent, and doesn't back off when the pressure comes on. I think that's the kind of people I like in my team. Whether they're lacking maybe certain areas in terms of the background or the technical expertise. If they're people who are, really trustworthy, really reliable, dependable when the pressure comes on, I think you've enough of those. You won't go far wrong.
I agree with you more. Yeah,
I agree, and I think you raised an interesting one there around kind of opportunities, and the Chinese believe that with crisis come opportunity, and that it's really that mindset, that ability to filter that actually there could be an opportunity inside of that, and rather than sort of saying every silver lining has a cloud behind it, it's kind of flipping that on its head and really seeing the opportunity. But rejection is an unfortunate reality, and I'm a big believer in that. It's not about what happens to you or in your world, it's how you decide to react next and what you do that counts. Maybe could you share with us maybe how you kind of have maybe had that yourself, overcome it, and then how do you instill that mindset upon other folks to say, look, this is part of the process, guys, is you're going to get knockbacks. What does that look like in a sporting and business context, Bernard?
Yeah, I think if you asked me what my super strength was, it'd be resilience. I've really worked hard on trying to create that mindset where I don't see defeat or a rejection as the end point. And from a sporting point of view, I was dropped an incredible amount of times. I lost my contract that year. I failed a medical, and a lot of people would have said at 24 that's the end. I got picked for Ireland at 98 in 1998. I didn't get my first cap till 2005, so I had 7 years where I was kind of in and out of the squad and third choice hooker, but couldn't get a cap. So I had lots of opportunities to, I suppose, fine tune my resilience methods. And when I was playing professionally, and now and then coaching, obviously it's a difficult environment to be in. You're not going to win as many games. You lose if you're with a team who don't have the resources. So for me, it's a case of saying, okay, well, what am I good at? And I think one of those has to be being able to deal with setbacks, because particularly in sales, that's going to be a huge part. And how I deal with setbacks is I go to a pre-mortem post-mortem routine. So if I don't get what I need out of a sales pitch, or if I miss out on a tender, or or whatever happens in my kind of working life, I go back to what I hopefully and normally do as a pre-mortem. So before I have any sales pitch or strategy, I kind of work out, well, what's my super strengths here in terms of the product or the financial package or whatever, our relationship with that client. How well do what I have meet, the criteria they're looking for, and what questions could have I asked? What am I up against? What are the barriers to this happening? So that's my pre-mortem, and then I'll obviously have the event, which will be the pitch or the series of pitches, and the whole sales process that we all know. And then obviously if I'm successful, great. But if I'm not successful, I do a really strong post-mortem. Sorry, even if I am successful, I do a post-mortem, because it's important to actually realize, why you won it, and also did you leave anything behind, and what you could do better. And again, that's going back to your pre-mortem, the event, and then obviously your post-mortem. So once I do those three things, I then say, well, look, I've actually learned something from that. And it could be in one of the three stages, and that's great. Now I'm better. So the next time that opportunity comes up, I have a far better chance of achieving it. And I'm actually working with someone at the moment, and his name is Trevor Reagan. He's a learning specialist. He's got a very good podcast and website called the Learner Lab. But he used the analogy of a zoo tiger and a jungle tiger. And they both have the same DNA. They're both effectively the same animal. But which do you think is in a better learning environment? And 99% of people would say, the jungle tiger. But yet most of us would prefer to be in the zoo a lot of the time, when you're guaranteed shelter, you're guaranteed food and safety. But the reality is, to become better, we'll always be in the zoo a little bit, because we're always going to drift back into that, and certain things will fall into our lap at certain times, particularly in sales. But the reality is, the people are the person I want to be is have a really good mix of being in the jungle and being out there and having your wins and having your losses, but seeing the losses as not being fatal, and being part of really growing and I suppose achieving something.
I think that's absolutely true. And I see the world as a series of experiences and learning experiences. And, sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. But you've actually said there that actually you should learn even when you do win, because, you could have left something behind that might, rear its head kind of in the future. John, would you agree with that from your own experience?
I just think it's a great point, particularly in this environment, that a lot of people are probably holding out hope that we just want to get back to normal. But that's a very interesting perspective, Bernard, that's really not what it's about. It's to get to somewhere else. And that somewhere else is growth and evolution and, new things, new insights, the stuff that we've learned with this crisis going on. We get an opportunity to apply that now, and not just to pay lip service to it, and not just to write a tweet about it, or not to, make a comment on a LinkedIn profile, to actually be in action, to, say and do the things that we want to, I think, to make us better and people around us better as well, and to actually not want to get back to the way things were. I think that's a fantastic. I think that's a fantastic analogy that you just shared with us there.
Yeah, well, thank you. But there's another thing that I think maybe I'm only a year really in the corporate world, so but what I've seen, there's not enough work on actually learning from really high achievers. And a lot of some of the salespeople that I've dealt with and some I'm trying to help, their natural reaction is to try and protect themselves and find reasons why they haven't been hitting their numbers or not succeeding. And I understand, there's probably, we all can find reasons why we're maybe not achieving at the level that we're expected to. But what I did was I was like, well, okay, I'm 43 years of age. I'm starting this this career later, 20 years later than most people, 23 years later than most people. I can't afford to have the stereotypical pathway, where I spend 10 years learning my craft. I don't have time for that. So, so what I did and what I see a lot of coaches doing, a lot of athletes doing is they go find, the best in the world, and they go ask them how they've achieved it. And it sounds so stupidly simple, but I don't think there's enough of that. And so for me, for example, we're a big company. We've 18,000 people, Refinitiv, and within the first 2 or 3 weeks, I asked my sales manager, who are the top performers in UKI in terms of consistently hitting their numbers and being part of CEO Circle. And for me, they were my target list. They were the people I wanted to spend time with. They were the people I wanted to ask questions of, because one, they're consistently achieving, but also they know our company and our clients best, even though they're working in different patches. And I think that saved me so much time. I think, but I asked them how many new starters or how many people internally tap into that knowledge and experience, and it's actually rarer than you would believe. And like from a coaching point of view, like the amount of probably emails and phone calls, the likes of Eddie Jones, Joe Schmidt, Stuart Lancaster get on a weekly basis from other coaches, trying to have a coffee, trying to have a Zoom call, trying to go watch them coach, would be phenomenal, because we all see that as being a great way of getting better at what we do. And from a sales point of view, for me, I've learned a huge amount by just basically, I suppose, shadowing for a day or two, but also, having a mentor list internally who've been there, done that, and have 20 years experience, and kind of have seen what I haven't seen before, and can give me some really good advice. And again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe everyone's doing it, but if there's some people who listen to the podcast who aren't doing it, I would definitely recommend it. And sometimes, what I've got feedback on from some people was that, that guy will be too busy. He won't want to share because that's his IP. He'd be worried that I'll catch up. The reality is, I would say 9 out of 10 people will share and just enjoy actually helping others, and they actually find that maybe something that comes up over the course of that conversation might help them get better. So they're not worried about keeping it a secret. They know that they've fine-tuned it. It's their way of doing it, but definitely I think you can learn from that.
I couldn't agree more with you. And I think there you're actually hiring a mentor to learn from the best. If you want to figure out how to learn a new skill, you find somebody who's mastered it and you copy the hell out of them. And I think the education system is designed to prevent us from copying. But actually the reality is, and to learn a good skill, you should copy others. And I think that's absolutely the case. I suppose as we wrap up here, Bernard, thank you for sharing some absolutely fantastic insights with the audience. I think it'll be of great benefit. I think what I'm really keen to know is, having worked across different cultures and living in different countries, how would you describe the Irish sense of the crack, and what does that mean for you, and how you adopted it in your career cross-culturally?
Look, I think it's been a huge help to me. Just I suppose that's ability to engage with people, to build strong relationships quite quickly, and it has, even the language barrier hasn't stopped it. I mean, I think we've got a reputation for enjoying company and enjoying fun, and whether it's been in Japan or Manchester or or France, and I've been across all parts of France, and did my French pro license in Paris for 12 weeks with 25 other French coaches. I think that it's brilliant. It actually helps us, I suppose, make friends and contacts. And ironically, I have a coaching group now that we set up in lockdown that that a lot of the people I've come across during my career, I'm back in touch with now that I've kind of lost touch with over the last year. So it is unique. It's a brilliant. I think it's a brilliant starting point to do business, particularly in account management and sales, when you can actually, I suppose, build strong relationships with your clients. It's the foundations upon which your business will develop, and it's yeah, it's been absolutely instrumental in my success and my enjoyment of my career so far across rugby and corporate.
Fantastic. Well, look, I really want to thank you for joining us on today's podcast. It's been very insightful, greatly appreciated, and I look forward to catching up with you again in the future.
Best of luck.
Thanks,
and really appreciate it. Thank you guys.
Be safe, man. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Global Tech Leaders Podcast, designed for both established and aspiring career-focused tech rock stars, as well as helping leadership figure out how to speak global in today's multicultural world. For further details, check out sf-talent.com.